Hello guys. As promised, this is the let me just clean something up. This is the video for the Sound Boy or Sound Kid or whatever you want to call him. This is the hard surface model we'll be using in the second assignment to play with substance painters, generators, cool little effects, trying to make this look as high poly as possible, or as high resolution as possible. So within this build, we've got a lot of parts which are kind of hidden inside other places, lots of edges which transition angles quite drastically, lots of places where you can have either a big graphic or little tiny little graffiti or something like that. Well, you know, it's particularly up to you how you want to texture this guy or make him look. I've got an idea in mind, kind of grungy a little bit, like a rave robot sort of thing, so lots of emissive maps and stuff. But as promised, I'm going to show you how to make the head. So actually, the head that I'm looking at here isn't probably the head that I'm going to show you how to make, because I've actually been making the head a few times, and I've decided that the way I've done it here is a little bit of a messy way of making it. But all in all, we'll be making this shape. And what I am going to say is for the interior of the cone at the back. So this is maybe like a speaker, like a car speaker or something. You can do whatever sort of speaker you want to have in the back. If you want to really challenge yourself and go for something like this, you can do. Or if you want to go for something a little bit more vintage, you can do. But then if you go for something more simple, I'm going to expect people to really kind of make that texture shine and kind of really do a good job and not just half-ass something that's quite an important feature of the character, because this is a very big feature that you can have a lot of fun with. So let's get started. So I'll just grab this guy, I'll stick him in a layer, I'm moving off to the side, and I will reference him out so we can't touch him. So how I'm going to make this head is not with a sphere, but with a sphere created from a cube. And that's really simple to do. So if I just make a cube in the middle of the scene and then I subdivide it, you're going to see that it actually turns into a sphere. So a sphere with a very unique wireframe. Everything's cubes, there's no triangles, so at the top and at the bottom there's no poles, and everything's fairly regular. Of course, around these corner areas here you're going to get slightly smaller faces, but generally everything's very equal. So I'm going to make the head, but before I subdivide it, what I'm going to do is make sure everything's in the middle of the world, and then I'm going to rotate it 45 degrees so it's sitting like this. So I've got much more of like a diamond shape. And then I'm going to subdivide it, but I'm not going to subdivide it too much. Maybe only 3 divisions here. So I've got a little box up, 3 divisions, because you can keep going higher and higher, but it's going to give you more to deal with. And this is a little bit too low poly, and this for me is a little bit too high poly. So I'm just going to go for this one. And then it's really easy just to subdivide this later on if I do want to, but for now I'm going to say 3 divisions is fine. So let me just change this. There we go. I move this up about head height. You're going to see something. You're going to see these, and this is why I moved it 45 degrees. I've got these triangles here, which I'm going to use to create the insets for the eyes. But I'm going to go about I'm going to go about things a little bit differently than I've done here, because again, after making this a couple of times, I've kind of got a better idea about how to do it. It's a little bit more complex, but it still works. So absolutely works. So I got my head. The first thing I can actually do is take off the back of the head to create this opening, because this cone was made flat on the ground first, and then I kind of brought it back. I brought it into place and bridged it to the head. So I'm going to take the back of the head off. So I'm thinking about maybe there, to create this opening like that, because then I can grab all these edges here, and then using my tool settings I'm going to change my axis orientation because I want to flatten all these out, because at the minute it's a little bit wavy. You can see it's going around, it's a little bit wavy. I'm going to change that so this pivot kind of sits along the normal axis, so it's going to start facing outwards. I'm going to make sure all these edges selected, go to axis orientation, and change this to component, and what you're going to see is it flips like that. So I'm going to grab this tool here, which is facing off, and then just bring it to the center. Oh, first make sure you've not got, first make sure you've not got any constraint on. So if I grab this tool and now just start moving it, you can see everything that starts to flatten out like that, which is great. So that means I've got a nice flat surface to work on. Cool. So at this point I could probably do a save. So I'm going to save as, I'm going to say Samkid 02 or 01, it'd be my first save. So now it's time to start making the eyes. So I've kept the amount of features very low. I've got kind of like a little vintage microphone for the mouth. These two little holes, which could be ears, but I'm seeing sort of like light inside. And I've got our two eyes. And the eyes, I'm just thinking of recesses with camera lenses or a scope lens or something like that. There's some form of mechanical lens inside there. And then the body I'm going to keep as like a pretty simple object, but you can probably make in like you make in a couple of seconds, but this is what I'm thinking about mostly. So I'm actually going to also split the head in half, because if I just work on one side, I can just concentrate on that one side and not have to worry about anything else. So I've got my little set of triangles here, or these three quads, and I'm going to bring a cylinder in, which I'm going to use as a landmark for where I want my eye to be. So what I'm going to do is actually count how many edges I'm dealing with on this bigger triangle here. So the amount of edges going round is the amount of edges I've got around my sphere. So I'm not taking this first initial triangle here, which is only 6, and that's really not enough. I'm going to take this one. So this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. A 12-sided cylinder is what I'm going to make. So make a cylinder. Let's turn that into a 12. And what I'm also going to do is snap it so it sits over this point here, where you've got the middle of this triangle. I'm going to snap it to that vertex, because that's like right in the center of the eye. Oh, like that. And then I can move that in a little bit. So at the minute I'm just going to use this as a positioning tool. So don't worry about anything just yet. So this is going to become the cavity of my eye here. So I'm going to make this inset, and then I'm going to make the lens on the inside. And this is where I'm going to make things a little bit different to how I would normally make stuff. Like I said, this is me making this, and I actually looked at the old version. This version thought I could probably make this a whole lot nicer. So what I'm going to do is, now that I've placed this in and I'm kind of getting an idea about how big I want this eye socket to be, so what I want you to think about is this is going to be this main circle over here, not the actual small lens itself, it's the actual socket of the eye. So once I've decided that, I'm going to duplicate this off and just move a duplicate back, just to keep as a bit of a, just in case I need it. Okay, and with this left, I'm going to use the multi-cut tool to actually cut a division going across it, and then place the vertex into a better position so it sits across the surface of this model. So please don't mind the banging, people are getting building work next door. So from the top view, I'm going to come in and I'm going to get my multi-cut tool. Now we're used to using this because we can either place in cuts like this, or we can hold control and put in a space like this. But what we can also do with the multi-cut tool, if you've not done it already, is click off in space and drag to create a line, and this is going to create a cut across the surface. So what I'm going to do is place one as close to the surface as I can, like that, and just cut across there. So I put a cut in. You can't see it because part of it is hidden within the mesh, but I put a cut in there, which is an approximation, or not an approximation, the closest as that I can get it to the surface. So what I'm going to do now is go in and turn on X-ray, because I'm going to have to kind of drag these out back and forth. They start dragging these so they sit, or they look like they sit on the surface of the model. So you're going to have to go back and forth from the X-ray mode just to, if any of these edges are sitting inside like this, you can be careful and just grab them like that. Just super careful about clicking. You can just go in, because I know they're sitting just underneath the surface, so if I click in that general area, I'm going to get them points. And I'm just bringing them around so they're sitting on the surface like that. Awesome. So I'm going to delete this outer face like this. I'm going to delete that face on the outside. So all I've got left now is this interior, which I'm actually going to flip the normals on this one. I'm going to flip these. There we go. So mesh display it. There you go. So all them normals now are facing inwards. And I'm now going to create the cavity for the eye. So like I said, I'm going to make it a little bit differently than this. I'm going to make it cleaner. So what I'm going to do is select these three inner quads, grow it once. So that's me hitting Shift and full stop to grow a selection, Shift and comma to shrink a selection. So Shift and full stop, Shift and comma. So grow that so it's like that. I'm going to extrude and then just get the offset and bring it in a little bit. Like that. Okay. So I'm just bringing it in a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is later on I'm going to delete these. Well, I can delete these three here. Let's bring that in a little bit. I'll leave that as it is right now. So all I'm going to use is the edge slide constraint from our modeling toolkit transform constraint. I'm going to use a surface slide. So, sorry, not the edge slide, the surface slide. And I'm going to slide edges more towards their destination, where I'm actually going to bridge them to this inner cylinder. Because if I just delete these faces here, if I delete these guys and then start merging and welding, then everything's going to kind of got to indent, and it's going to get, you're going to get odd looking surfaces. So I'm just going to slide them in at first. So constrain surface slide, start bringing it in a little bit. So this is where you're going to have to kind of split everything up into shapes. So obviously this edge here is going to go to this edge. Because that's how we counted the 12 edges at first. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to get them in that sort of position. Oops. Okay. Okay, right, okay, cool. So now what I'm going to do is, I could either just merge these edges to this cylinder, making sure I'm taking these outer edges to the cylinder, or I can bridge. I'll turn that surface slide off. I can bridge from the out here into the center cylinder. Sorry, I'm losing my words. I could bridge from this edge here to the cylinder, and then the edges that are left behind this edge, I can start to use the surface slide again just to get these into a bit of a better position. I'm losing my words today, sorry. So I'm going to combine these two, and I'm going to merge them. Not a merge, sorry, a bridge. Now you can see here that I've got a bit of a problem with my bridge, and that's because the bridge offset is a bit off. So inside our bridge, I can use the bridge offset and just start to manipulate that number around, and eventually it will snap to a well. So for me it's 12, but you can see here now that all the lines are nice and straight. Nice, good. So now that I've done that, we've got this edge going round, which I'm now going to go in and just readjust to regulate the spacing going round using the edge slide, surface slide, or right slide. There we go, and you can spend a bit of time just making sure it's as nice as possible. I can see that some of these are a little bit indented, so I can drag them out slightly. What I'm going to do anyway is to bevel that edge going round. Now, one thing I've just noticed, and this is the nature of modelling, is I could have just brought this inner edge in a little bit, then bridged towards there. I didn't have to bring it in as close as I've done. So that's one thing, you know, in hindsight I could have done a little bit faster as well. But now that gives us our eye cavity, and I can just bring this back up. So let's just select all these and oh, oops, there you go, like that. So I don't want to bring this too close. I don't want to be overlapping like I'm doing here. I want this to have a little bit of an indentation like that. You might even want to just bring it in a little bit like that. It's totally up to you. But as long as it's a cavity like this, I'm perfectly fine with it. Now what I can also do is bevel this edge going round, just to give it a little bit more of a better angle for us. Make it look a bit nicer. Let's go around and some stuff out. There you go. Right, so that's our eye cavity in there. Then I can start just making, now that I know that there's a 12-sided cylinder inside there, I can make a 12-sided little lens. I think this one I modelled after a very short photographic lens, but there's enough surface on there that I've got like a little, I've got areas I can put some text, I've got my actual lens, and if I'm really feeling a bit spicy about it, I could use a transparency on this and then actually have physical geometry behind this layer that will be the actual aperture of the lens itself. That'd be quite cool to do. So after this, I'm just going to put in this ear. That's very simple to do. Just find the position where it's at. So I think it's about there, maybe a bit forward, maybe there, maybe there. So I'm going to say there. I'm just going to extrude that in. Again, using the offset for the size of the ear. And then, again, using something like the edge slide or surface slide. Just make that as much as a circle as I want. And then I just extrude that in. And I beveled its edge. Like that. And obviously this is a rushed, well, not a rushed version, but a quicker version than what I've done on this version and the one I'll be showing you in class. Just because I don't want to spend hours modelling this. Then I've just said that and now I'm going and doing minor tweaks because they're staring at me and I don't like it. Okay. Cool. And I've done the exact same thing for the mouth. I've decided where I want to get the actual mouth to be. So let me just flip this over, turn off that edge constraint. Oh. There we go. Let's weld this. There we go. So I'm going to decide where I want my mouth to be, and it's going to be around here. And how big I want that mouth to be. Well, I want it to be kind of noticeable, so I'm going to say around here. So I'm going just like before. I'm going to do a little bit of an extrusion and just bring in the offset a tiny bit, and then find out how many edges I've got going on in here. So I've got 10 going on around here. So I could either make a 10-sided shape, a shape with 10 edges going around side, or I could do what I've done here by just setting up some triangles to bring them edges into one. And all I've done with this is make a half a cylinder, half a cube, split into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 segments, and then there's 3 inner segments. I've just extruded that in and then created this little indentation for the sort of the vent section. So later on I'll show you quickly how to do that, but I think we should move on to the back of the head, to this cone back here. So I've really gone all out on mine. I've made some pretty complex geometry of these overhanging sort of like rims. I've modelled mine after the sort of speakers you get inside them like souped up cars that have like monster sound systems in. But if you Google speaker cone or speaker in general, you're gonna get loads of different types. You've got like the really flashy ornate ones, you've got the really old-fashioned vintage ones. You know, you can decide which one you want to do. Obviously, be wary of which one you'll actually be able to do within the time you've got allotted, because you've only got a short time to model this. But I think about how you actually make it, and if you go for something simple, like I said before, you know, I'd expect you to then go all out on the modeling of the texture. Sorry, because there's so much surface, actual geometric surface detail in this. I probably wouldn't go so far into the texture, but much more into how I'm texturing it. So lots of emissive maps, or some really nice like inlaid writing somewhere, or maybe even, if you know what a ticker is, I might have a ticker going around this center ball there. But that's all for later on. So right now, what I've got to do is actually find out how many edges I've got going around this opening I've made. And for me, that's 32. Now, I've got this heads up display going on. So if you want to have this turned on, which I advise doing, I always have this turned on. This stuff on the right side of the screen is just for rendering, but for modeling, this is really invaluable. It shows you it verts the edge, the faces, the tris, and the UVs in any one scene. So if I want to turn this on, I'll go to display, heads up display, and then poly count here. So I'll double click that and it'll tell me that I've got 32 edges selected, so I need to make a 32 sided cylinder. So let's make a cylinder. and change it to 32. Now what I'm going to have to do is look from the top and see what sort of split this is giving me, which is giving me a good split, because remember I want to have that vertical and horizontal split to make it really easy on myself. If this was to give me a split that wasn't vertical or horizontal like that, so let's say I had something like this. Oh no, not that one. For instance, if I had something that was like this, where I've got a split going across the center, but not a split going across the the vertical, I'd need to position this so that this vertical line goes across the center of my object. But in this case, we don't need to because it's 32. Cool. And then I'm going to model everything flat. I'm not going to move it into position and model it here, because then that'll give me a bit of some hard work, because some of these functions work on a world position, and you won't be able to get the right sort of right outcome for your function. What I am going to do is move it kind of into place first and rotate it 45 degrees, because remember my head was rotated 45 degrees, so this flattened section back here will be 45 degrees. So I'll move that to 45, and I'll just kind of get a rough kind of like scale in place. Just try and get the right sort of size. Just something like that. Because all I'm going to do is make the cone separately and then bridge it to my head. So I'll bring that back down and we start modeling on this. And the first thing I do to this, well, the first thing I would do personally is take everything but the top off, that. And the first indentation I would make personally is from the very edge, or the first thing I do is make an extrusion which goes from the very edge to the very center. So I'm basically just making the angle of this cone. Put it down. So obviously I need to get rid of all these top bits. Yeah. Oh, I don't want you selected. There. Oh. So now with this I can decide how deep my cones are going to be, how sheer the edges are going to be. And then I'm also looking at maybe doing something a little bit like this. Most speakers have got sort of like a bulb in the very center of it. So I would probably make a 32-sided sphere and just bridge it to the inside of here as well. So if I make a 32-sided, let's get this into a grid position so it's easy to work with. Make a 32-sided cylinder. Well, just 32 across the subdivision axis, because I'm not particularly bothered about the height. Like that. And then from here I can start to make some edges. Like, so I've got a reference of what I want, or an idea about what I want my cone to look like, so then I can start going in and add those dimensions, add those kind of features. And all I'm doing is just adding edges. taking away faces that I might need to get rid of. So it's all pretty easy stuff. Like I said, the main thing about this brief for me is just getting the modelling done quickly so they can start moving on to the actual texturing phase. And then, so you can decide, you know, all these different speaker types you can have. You can start to make them. So what I did as well for mine here is I actually decided I want 4 separate sections that are identical the same, like this. And I basically quartered the entire cone. So I cut the entire cone into a quarter, and then made everything on one side, and then just rotated it around 90 degrees, so that I basically had the same thing going around. So if I just do that here quickly, so I'll just quarter everything off like this, and then I want like an indentation here. So see if you have to bring that in. So I want these going all the way around. Now that I've done that, in my rotation here, I'll duplicate it and then start rotating it around, and then that's going to be at -90. And then that is going to be minus. Ooh. Turn the lights on. So make sure you're actually activating that. So duplicate that again and move it around. We have -180. Duplicate that, move it around. In -270. There we go. So now I've got my 4 sections made, and I've got a bit more of an interesting cone. So if I'm doing anything like this, I would make the section as a whole first, and then just duplicate and rotate around. Trying to think about the texture as well, because I don't want people to go too in depth with the geometry, because a lot of the information is going to be brought out in the texture, like the edge wear. So if I was going with like a really kind of gnarly Raverbot sort of motif, I'd want a lot of edge wear, I'd want a lot of like paint, I want a lot of smashes, dings and bangs and stuff. So around these areas I'd have lots of edge wear. Maybe there's a bit of glowing whatever's coming underneath the neck. I'd worry about that more than just geometry, but still have his geometry looking good. So don't skip out on the geometry. So obviously using your bevels is a really good way of getting a little bit of interest to your surface. So playing with the settings inside that as well. To get some interesting shapes going on. Really have a look at speaker cones as well, because it's not just ones that go in hi-fis or anything. There's ones that are like used for headphones. There's ones that are used for massive PA speakers. They're all kind of different because they all have different loads to work with. They're all different impedances. The different. You know, it's a big world of difference out there. There's depth, there's height, it's all different. So you can decide what you want to do with that. And you can have a lot of fun with that, a lot of fun. So have yourself a motif which goes over the entire object or the entire character, and then decide like how far do you want to chase that down the rabbit hole, because it's quite fun what you can do. I think even just using very basic shapes can give you something, you know. So that's basically my speaker cone that I'm going to put in. There's some nice information, so I can put maybe lettering inside here, or this can be a slight emissive. These are too big to be super emissive, I would say, but a slight emission. Maybe there's some branding, maybe some of this is made out of cone or paper or card. Because if those of you are familiar with PA speakers or hi-fi speakers, the speakers themselves, the actual thing that kind of resonates with sound, is actually made out of paper or of card. So, you know, maybe the speaker's made out of paper or card, so you know that you've got that sort of texturing to go. So when I'm done with that, I'm going to bring this into the middle of the scene, line it up with our character, rotate this into place, and bring it in. Cool. Now what you're going to see here is it's not a perfect sphere, the head, because it has come from a cube, so it has got some bias towards being wider on the edges and flatter on the top, flatter on the faces. So it doesn't matter though, because all we have to do is just bridge. We don't have to worry about that at all. So we know it's 32 edge, so this should work perfectly. Which it does. There we go. And then we can, we can change these edges however we want. So I'm just gonna do a quick bevel. Like that. If you look, yeah, keep like that. Cool. Now the only thing left to do is one. I'll put in a mouth, and in fact you can decide how you want to do the mouth as well, because I've chosen an old resonator microphone, but there are different things you can have for the mouth. So just think about how you want to do the mouth as well, as long as it's simple. So the only thing left to do would be the neck here, or this little area here, which is pretty simple to do. Let me just count how many edges I've got going around there. I've got 16 edges going around. Maya's playing funny games with me. There we go. So at the very bottom of the head, which is going to be here, DB4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So this whole area I've got selected here, this group of 16 faces, should wield 16 edges, which it does. So I'm just going to do another extrusion in. And just like I've done before, I'd probably bring in a 16-sided cylinder and just line up the vertices to that before I delete this interface I've got selected here, just so I can get a nice circle in there, or a nice cylinder in there. So let's make this a 16-sided cylinder when Maya wants to cooperate. Okay, so we're back. Okay, so we're going to make this into a 16-sided cylinder. 16. There we go. And then, just like I've done with the eye, I'm going to move it into place so that I can get a nice shape in there. Okay. So it's probably useful to use the object symmetry X turned on as well. So in my tool settings, toolkit, turn symmetry object X, and then surface slide, and then I can start just moving these into place. because it's not going to start bouncing around all over the scene. They're going to stick to the surface. I can just manhandle these into place. Like that. Cool. Okay. So I can go around. So I've just moved the top of the cylinder down, so it's more or less in the right position where I want my my little indentation to be. So I'm just gonna do this. Now what you could also do is make a 16-sided cylinder and then do the exact same approach with the cone. So actually make a flat shape and then just move it up and bridge it in. You can do that. There's lots of different ways to do stuff. As long as you've got a nice regulated edge structure with no kind of like no over edging anywhere, so no crazy amount of edges anywhere. I'm not particularly bothered about how you do stuff, as long as one, it's quads or triangles. Quads if you can get them, triangles, you know, if you can't, you just seem to not be able to not have them. Okay. So what I would do now is get rid of that, and then I would just start extruding in and making this whole interior structure work a lot nicer. So that I've got my little indentation like that. Okay. So what I'm actually going to do is put this that I've just made on its own layer and move it off to the side, because I'm done with it for now. And I'm going to bring out the original, just to show you a way of unwrapping head. And I'm going to break everything down into sections here. So I'm going to unwrap the interior of the ears, the eye sockets, the mouth and the cone all separate, and then have the head and unwrap that, and do the same sort of thing I do with human head and put some splits in there so that we can unwrap this and have the splits in places which aren't necessarily that important. But the great thing about Substance Painter is our splits will be unnoticeable anyway, due to the fact of how we're going to be painting it or how we're going to be generating the texture. So I'm going to have, because I'm going to be selecting stuff by faces, and a lot of them, I'm going to have Object X Symmetry turned on, and then, yeah. So I'm going to do a planar projection of these guys going down the Z-axis, or the X-axis, so X. So they're now laid out. So of course, if you were doing this on double screen, oh, you can see that I've already unwrapped this anyway. Well, most of it anyway. So I'm just going to actually grab everything else and completely mess it up. There we go. So I've just done the ears and I've moved them off into space and split them up. So yeah, like I said, if you're working on a double screen or a wide screen, it's best to have kind of everything in its own little area, so you don't have to close any of these windows. You can have them all open at the same time. So I'm just moving the ears into place, flipping them. Of course, again, I'm using the old-fashioned UV editor. So what I'm going to do is actually jump over to Maya 18, which has got the new UV editor in. If you've got the old UV editor, then keep using that. You should know where everything is so far. If you've got Maya 17 with the new UV editor, keep using that. In fact, what I'm going to do is stay in here and do everything inside here, because we've still got the same functions as we have done, as we've got in the new version. It's just that they're in different positions. Right, so I've done my ears, I've just moved them off into space. I know they're a bit big, but I can sort them out later on. I'm going to do my eyes the exact same way, so make sure Object Symmetry X is turned on. I'm going to grab, so I'm going to do the entire eye socket and just grab that as all one go. So just start growing this selection till I get that. In fact, maybe, yeah, that. So I've got everything, for me, I've got everything under the bevel. And I'm going to be projecting that from the z-axis, so planar, project that from the z-axis, move that to the side. Then I've got my little speaker mouth, so this will take a little bit of time. So just go through, grab everything. And I'm going to project that from the z-axis. But then I'm going to, obviously this is slightly at an angle, and my planar is staring directly at it from the x-axis. What I'm going to do is just tilt the projection so it's looking at it more from the front, from its object's front. So on every one of these little grey camera rigs, I guess we'll call it, we've got this little cross at the bottom left corner. So they never really tell you what this is for. If you click this, you can then access all the different ways to manipulate the projection. So what I'm going to do is click it once, and then when I've got this, I'm going to click the blue circle, and then I can start to rotate this. And I'm just going to rotate it so it's more or less flush on like that, and then that gives me a much better projection. So like I said before, I'm just going to do everything separately and just move stuff into their own space for now, so I can unwrap it easily. So same thing with the speaker. I'm just going to start grabbing this. I mean, what you could do as well is just start unwrapping this on its own before you actually attach it to the model. What might happen is when you attach it to the model, you might get some stray UVs around the edges that you need to reproject or something like that. So again, the same thing here. I'm going to click the little red X and then move that so it's in much more of a flat angle. Like that. And all that should be left is the head. Oh, we can do the cone. We can do this little do down here as well. Oh. Apparently there we go. Crow selection was freaking out a bit then. There we go. So I'm just going to project this from the y-axis. It's nice and flat. Oh, just check that my speaker is predominantly blue. Flip that. There we go. And then, like I said, all I've got left to do now is my head, the rest of my head. So if I project this from the z-axis, so this I'm going to approach just like I've done with any other character in the past. I project this from the front, and I want to basically unwrap this skin so it unfolds as much as I can. Sorry about, I don't know what that noise is in the background. It's I don't know what this clicking noise is in the background. If you can hear it. So yeah, so like I said, I'm going to go around and select the edges I want to cut so that I can unfold this properly. So definitely back there. I'm going to cut that one, and so and I'll also cut underneath the mouth here, just to release as much tension as I can off the UV. So I'm going to cut those. I'm going to unfold. So I'm just going to go to my unfold and just check, if you're using the old version, I'm just going to check that unfold 3D is working. Make sure pack is clicked off. Like that. Here we go. So that is looking pretty good. Okay. Yep, that's looking pretty damn good to me. No crazy bad UVs anywhere. No warping at all, so that's good. Cool. So, I mean, that's as simple as, I mean, the cone's going to take a bit of time, especially on this one, because this is a very kind of complex cone. But again, I would just unwrap this in sections. I'd take this, now that I've separated it off, I'd grab the certain sections of these and probably reproject these into areas as one big group. Unwrap the cone as one big group, and just try and get it as neat as possible. Cool. I guess what you can do as well is not try and contain everything inside one texture sheet. Within theory, there's no limit to the amount of different textures you can use. Obviously, when I say textures, I mean texture groups, like one for the head, one for the body, one for the cone, sort of thing. There's different maps I want, so everything needs, and it's all outlined in the handbook. There's certain maps I want you to use, so like color map, specular map, roughness map, emission map, normal, height, ambient occlusion, all these different ones that will come when you finish your actual texturing. You'll get all those. But you can put, I would say put the cone on one texture map for itself. So this is going to be one thing, the texture on its own, texture set on its own. And then you're going to have the rest of the head, and then you're going to have the body. So you can have like 3 texture maps, texture groups, whatever you want to call them, sets, just to make it easier yourself. So don't try and put the cone in the same texture set as the head, because there's not enough space. We want to try and get as much pixel information into this as possible. So the head, you've got a lot that you can contain there. It's a very big object, but with lots of small things. So all these small areas like the eyes, the mouth, can all be kept in their own little areas. So notice as well in my UV editor, I've just separated these objects off, but I've not actually unwrapped these objects yet. So I would obviously not leave them like this, actually properly unwrap them. So I've got the bottom of the neck, which would need properly unwrapping, the little eye socket, which obviously would need properly unwrapping, the ears, and for me, this little resonator microphone style mouth. So you'll need to unwrap these by themselves as well. So please don't forget that. So obviously breaking stuff out into its parts, you've got for the eye socket, you've got the cavity the eye sits in, then you've got the actual lens itself, then you've got the body of the lens, and all these need to be unwrapped properly so that we can texture each one of these surfaces. Please don't skip on the unwrapping. Just because we're using Substance Painter doesn't mean that we can skip the minutiae of unwrapping. Unwrapping is still an incredibly important part of texturing, even for Substance. So please remember that. Okay, so that about does it. I'm not going to go into making the body. I will be uploading the body onto Sketchfab so you can actually have a look at it, and I'll quickly show you how I made the body in class, but this video is just about the head. And it's a fairly quick overview because you can not go too crazy on the design, because I want you to keep it geometrically quite simple so that we can have a lot of fun with the texturing, but still kind of have like some details in there that we can texture in. So like I said, the resonating mouth and the little camera lens style eyes. Keep it nice and simple. For one, it allows us to actually get these modelled in time, because remember, we've only got a week, in class week, to model these, but then you've got from the time I put this video up to the time the modelling section is meant to be done to complete the modelling and unwrapping. Cool. And remember, we're also going to be doing ID maps for this, so all your ID map stuff will be used inside this project as well. Okay, cool.